good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Saturday, 14th June 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The conflict between Israel and Iran has reached a dangerous peak, with both nations exchanging missile strikes and fiery rhetoric. Israel initiated attacks targeting key Iranian nuclear and military sites, hitting the Defense Ministry headquarters and Ahmedabad International Airport in Tehran. These strikes reportedly resulted in the deaths of several high-ranking military officials and nuclear scientists. Key energy facilities were also targeted, causing widespread fires and smoke across the capital. Iran retaliated by launching ballistic missiles towards Israel, striking areas including Tel Aviv and Rishon LeZion. A missile strike in Tel Aviv killed at least one person and injured 16. The exchange has effectively halted nuclear talks between the US and Iran, which were being mediated by Oman. The escalating hostilities have prompted international alarm, with world leaders urging de-escalation to avert a broader regional war. Russian President Vladimir Putin voiced his concerns to US President Donald Trump about the potential dangers of the conflict and proposed mediation. Jordan is set to reopen its airspace to civilian aircraft after the crossfire between Israel and Iran disrupted east-west air travel. India's potential role as a mediator in the Israel-Iran crisis was highlighted by Israeli envoy Reuven Azar, who emphasized India's existing dialogue with both nations. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session to address the Israeli attacks on Iran. Amidst the broader conflict, Israeli strikes in Gaza have resulted in the deaths of at least 79 people, including many at a US-backed aid distribution site, worsening the already dire humanitarian situation. Palestinians in Gaza are struggling to access food and internet, and to find safety from airstrikes, while Palestinians in the West Bank lack adequate shelters. This new wave of violence has intensified the ongoing crisis with Hamas, amid persistent allegations of aid diversion. Reacting to Israel's actions, an Iranian lawmaker indicated that Tehran is considering closing the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial choke point for global oil transit. Iran, already grappling with an energy crisis due to gas shortages, faces substantial costs and delays in repairing the damage from the Israeli strikes. The closure of Iranian airspace has caused widespread air travel disruptions, including into forward Mediterranean, missing the Club World Cup. Israel claimed control of the airspace over Tehran and warned that Tehran will burn if more missiles are fired. Finally, the Israeli military issued an apology for an inaccurate depiction of India's map posted on their X handle on June 13, 2025, which was intended to illustrate the range of Iranian missiles. Iran and Israel have seen tensions escalate sharply. Mutual strikes and increasingly hostile rhetoric mark the conflict. Israel intensified its military campaign. Key Iranian civilian and energy infrastructure were targeted. Nuclear facilities and top commanders were also hit. Iran retaliated with drone and ballistic missile launches targeting Israel. Explosions occurred over Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. At least 3 people died and scores were wounded in Rishon LeZion during an aerial battle. Israeli rockets attempted to intercept the Iranian missiles. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that Iran's missiles pose a critical threat. The exchange of missile and air strikes has raised fears of a broader regional conflict. Iran launched its retaliatory strikes without significant support from regional allies. This has left it relatively geopolitically isolated. Airspace closures over Iran and Israel have disrupted thousands of flights. Israel's Ben Gurion Airport was temporarily closed. Major airlines relocated their fleets. The escalating conflict has derailed planned nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. These talks were scheduled to take place in Oman on June 15, 2025. Following the Israeli strikes, Iran deemed the talks meaningless. Oman confirmed their cancellation. Shamkhani, who was overseeing the nuclear talks, was killed in the Israeli strikes. President Trump suggested that Iran has a second chance to come to a nuclear deal amidst the rising tensions. In response to the crisis, the U.S. Navy deployed destroyers to the eastern Mediterranean as a precaution. The G7 summit is set to address the Iran-Israel tensions and the unpredictability of President Trump. Within Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei faces a significant challenge. This may be the greatest challenge since the 1979 revolution. Waning regional influence and the repercussions of Israeli attacks are contributing factors. The attacks targeted nuclear facilities and top commanders. Australia supports Israel's right to self-defense. This follows the strikes on Iranian nuclear operations and military leaders. Penny Wong described the situation in the Middle East as very perilous. Anthony Albanese urged Australians to leave the region. The situation presents Canadian PM Carney with an opportunity to showcase leadership amidst economic and geopolitical shifts. Australia will not participate militarily in the Middle East conflict, but will support its citizens there. Strategists are urging a re-evaluation of the $368 AUKUS nuclear submarine deal with the US and UK, suggesting an alternative echidna policy focused on defensive capability. In South Australia, a deadly algal bloom in the Coorong, an internationally significant Ramsar wetland, has killed over 200 marine species, with a bloom caused by Carenia mikimotoi algae. An Australian man was fatally shot, and another was injured at a villa in Bali, Indonesia. A Kiwi teenager driving a stolen BMW caused the death of a 33-year-old Melbourne motorcyclist, Keith Stevens, in a hit-and-run incident, and will be deported. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is scheduled to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at the G7 summit in Canada to discuss the AUKUS Defense Pact and tariffs. Turning to the United States, millions participated in No Kings protests against President Donald Trump, coinciding with a military parade in Washington marking the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary. The protests, organized at approximately 2,100 sites by a coalition of over 100 groups committed to nonviolence, took place as tanks rolled through the Capitol during Trump's $45 million military parade, which drew both support and criticism. In Los Angeles, police used tear gas and officers on horseback to disperse anti-Trump protesters near a federal building. Minnesota lawmakers have been targeted in deadly, politically motivated shootings, according to Governor Walz. At the G7 summit in Kananaskis, Canada, world leaders are expected to challenge President Trump's America First strategy, with concerns that his policies may trigger a global recession and exacerbate conflicts in Gaza, Ukraine, and Iran. Pope Leo XIV delivered a message of hope to the U.S. in a recorded address from the Vatican, prepared for the audience at Wright Field, home of the Chicago White Sox. President Trump's tariff policies are threatening the unity and economic stability of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, by replacing uniform tariffs with varying import taxes. Escalation of the U.S.-China trade war has led many Chinese companies to reconsider their overseas expansion strategies and has diminished the popularity of our summer study trips for Chinese children. A retired admiral questioned Taiwan's will to fight in the event of a AAL attack, following a war game in Taipei that revealed vulnerabilities in Taiwan's defenses. A Palestinian man in Gaza carried his dead father on a bicycle after he was shot, trying to secure food parcels at a U.S. aid site. Meanwhile, in China, The escalating US-China trade war is causing companies to rethink their overseas expansion strategies, with less focus on the American market. Consequently, the popularity of our summer study trips for Chinese children has declined. Regarding Taiwan, a war game in Taipei revealed vulnerabilities in its defenses, leading a retired U.S. admiral to question Taiwan's will to fight in the event of a PLA attack. Finally, in Indonesia, an Australian man was fatally shot, and another was injured at a villa on the tourist island of Bali, United Kingdom. The UK is deploying military jets to the Middle East as tensions rise. Keir Starmer has stated his willingness to defend Israel against potential Iranian attacks, noting the risk to British bases. He has also called for a de-escalation of the conflict, following pressure, including from Elon Musk. The government will launch a judge-led national inquiry into organized child sexual abuse, empowered to summon witnesses. Concerns about grooming gangs prompted this inquiry, though some critics have labeled its focus as racially biased. David Beckham, Gary Oldman, and Roger Daltrey received knighthoods in King Charles's birthday honors. 2 men were jailed for stealing an 18-karat gold toilet from Blenheim Palace in 2019, a satirical piece on consumerism once offered to Donald Trump. President Zelensky announced that Ukrainian forces stopped a Russian advance in the Sumy region and reclaimed Andriivka village. He is advocating for stricter sanctions against Russia. The conflict in Ukraine was also discussed between Presidents Putin and Trump. Russia. President Vladimir Putin and former U.S. President Donald Trump spoke by phone, discussing the situations in the Middle East and Ukraine. Putin offered Russia's mediation in both conflicts, referencing past proposals during US-Iran nuclear talks. United States. Former President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed Middle East tensions and the Ukraine war in a phone call. Putin offered Russia's readiness to mediate, citing prior steps suggested during US-Iran nuclear negotiations. Trump's efforts to broker peace in Ukraine, Gaza, and on trade with China and Iran's nuclear program appear to be facing difficulties. Middle East. Amid rising tensions, the UK is deploying jets to the Middle East. Keir Starmer has indicated a readiness to defend Israel against potential Iranian strikes, acknowledging the risk to British bases. Presidents Putin and Trump discussed the Middle East situation in a phone call. Trump's efforts to broker peace in the region are facing difficulties. India is grappling with the aftermath of the Air India flight 171 crash near Ahmedabad, a tragedy that claimed 279 lives shortly after takeoff. Captain Sumit Sabharwal's distress call preceded the disaster, which involved numerous nationalities, including 169 Indians, 53 Britons, 7 Portuguese citizens, and 1 Canadian. The Indian government launched an official investigation, recovering the flight data recorder for analysis. Bereaved families, such as Rizwan Farah, who lost multiple relatives, are seeking answers. Identification efforts are underway at Ahmedabad hospitals, with families providing DNA samples. In response, India has begun inspections of its Boeing 787 fleet, concentrating on engine thrust and landing gear. Shifting to international affairs, India has diverged from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's stance by not condemning Israel's actions against Iran, advocating instead for diplomatic solutions. Furthermore, India aims to enhance its defense sector through domestic production of advanced weaponry, seeking to bolster its military strength, which currently surpasses Pakistan's but lags behind China's. The British Gujarati community in London convened at the International Siddhashram Shakti Centre to offer prayers for the crash victims. China is seeing a boom in new consumer stocks, fueled by Gen Z's spending on items like gold jewelry and affordable drinks, boosting companies such as Popmart International Group, Mixi Group, and Lapu Gold. China has initiated human trials for invasive brain-computer interface technology, the second country to do so, with the first participant being a 37-year-old quadriplegic. A large radio telescope, a joint project with Brazil and set to be one of Latin America's largest, has departed from Tianjin and is expected to arrive in Brazil in 2 months, aiming for operational status by 2026. President Xi Jinping has urged the Communist Party to learn from Chen Yun, a key figure in China's early economic planning, marking Chen's 120th birthday. During human rights talks, the EU voiced concerns over the deterioration of fundamental freedoms in China, citing government interference in the Dalai Lama's succession, crackdowns in Hong Kong, and the imprisonment of Uyghur and Tibetan activists. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has sought China's support for denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, asking President Xi Jinping to play a constructive role. Turning to the Asia-Pacific region, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has praised the Quad Minilateral grouping as crucial for deterring Chinese influence, though some observers have reservations regarding Washington's policies under President Donald Trump. On the Korean peninsula, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is seeking to de-escalate tensions with North Korea, having halted propaganda broadcasts at the border and requesting China's assistance in denuclearization efforts. Kazakhstan is set to embrace nuclear energy, with Russia's Rosatom spearheading a consortium to build the nation's first nuclear power plant. The project will utilize cutting-edge Russian technology. Turning to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, Day 12/6 saw continued fighting, with Russia advancing near Kostiantynivka and in the Sumy region. Russian forces are adapting their tactics, using small, mobile units with motorcycles and civilian vehicles. Ukraine is putting up resistance in the Sumy region. Russia and Ukraine also exchanged prisoners of war, following agreements made in Istanbul earlier in the month. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that rising global oil prices, partly due to Israeli actions against Iran, could aid Russia's war. In related news, it was revealed that Russian President Vladimir Putin had informed then U.S. President Donald Trump of Russia's willingness to engage in further Ukraine discussions, marking the fifth call between the two leaders since Trump took office. South Africa is contending with a devastating aftermath in the Eastern Cape province. Floods have resulted in 86 fatalities. President Ramaphosa has attributed this disaster to the growing impact of climate change. The nation is also confronting a severe HIV/AIDS crisis. Approximately 8 million South Africans are living with HIV/AIDS. This is the highest number of cases worldwide. UNAIDS Executive Director Winnie Byanyima stated that ending AIDS by 2030 is unlikely. She cited 1.3 million new infections in 2023. She also linked this setback to past funding reductions. Amidst a backdrop of global collaboration, Canada is currently hosting 20 world leaders in Kananaskis, Alberta, for the G7 Mountain Summit, orchestrated by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The summit offers a crucial space for bilateral discussions. Among these, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is set to meet with former US President Donald Trump, aiming to secure a tariff exemption and delve into the complexities of the AUKUS agreement. Furthermore, India's Prime Minister Modi is slated to participate in the G7 Outreach Summit, a key component of his extensive journey through Cyprus, Canada, and Croatia. While in Canada, Modi intends to engage with Prime Minister Mark Carney to mend and strengthen diplomatic ties between the two nations. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau also revealed that, spurred by current geopolitical instability and China's limitations on rare earth exports, Canada is poised to amplify investments within its mining sector. Japan celebrated Yasuhiro Aoki's French Animation Award for Kao, a futuristic romance between an office worker and a mermaid princess. In trade discussions, Ryosei Akazawa spoke with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick about a potential trade agreement. Online fraud involving rice sales surged, with 335 cases reported in April and May. A government study highlighted that over half of women in local assemblies have faced harassment personally or through family. Concerns grew regarding the safety of expired bottled water, especially in disaster preparedness contexts. Kyoto hotels noted a shift, with foreign tourists now outnumbering Japanese guests. President Trump approved Nippon Steel's investment in U.S. Steel, contingent on the Japanese company meeting government requirements. United States showcased a large military parade in its capital, a vision long pursued by President Donald Trump. The event occurred alongside heightened political activity in Los Angeles. A minor demonstration in Tokyo, echoing global sentiments, saw protesters rallying against the policies of US President Donald Trump on his 79th birthday. Meanwhile, biophysicist He Jiankui, known for his controversial gene editing work, intends to relocate to the United States to further his research on gene-edited embryos, despite lacking institutional support. Thailand and Cambodia are making headway in settling their border disagreements via diplomacy, which both countries agree is the best method. This follows a recent exchange of gunfire between their troops, which killed one Cambodian soldier. Thai Foreign Ministry spokesman Nikorndej Balankura confirmed that discussions are set to continue on June 15, 2025. Turning to the United States, protests in Los Angeles erupted after immigration and customs enforcement ICE raids, leading to the deployment of Marines who began their duties on Saturday. In a separate incident, one person was injured in a shooting in Utah, potentially linked to a protest. Nigeria is grappling with a severe security crisis after gunmen killed at least 100 people in Yelwada, a village in Benue State, during an attack that began late Friday and continued into Saturday. Amnesty International is calling on the Nigerian government to increase its efforts to prevent future attacks in the region, emphasizing the urgent need for enhanced security measures. Nicaragua mourns the loss of Violeta Barrios de Chamorro, its former president and a pivotal figure in the nation's history, who passed away at 95. Chamorro's surprising 1990 election victory marked the end of the country's civil war. She received the presidential sash from Daniel Ortega in April 1990, signaling the Sandinista party's departure from power. The Philippines recently engaged in a joint maritime exercise with Japan in the South China Sea, within its claimed territory. Approximately 10,000 foreign nationals, mainly Chinese, linked to Philippine offshore gaming operations, POGOS, remain in the country despite a ban, as revealed by Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission, PAOC, Chief Gilbert Cruz. Observers are urging the Philippines to carefully monitor China's increased naval activity in the Western Pacific, including the movements of a Chinese carrier group, while maintaining a delicate balance to avert escalation. France is increasingly concerned about nuclear proliferation, especially given North Korea and China's growing nuclear arsenals and the subsequent calls for nuclear development in nations such as South Korea. Due to the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, President Emmanuel Macron has delayed a planned conference on Palestinian statehood. This conference was slated to be co-chaired by Macron and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. New Zealand is in mourning following the death of author Maurice Guy in Nelson at 93, who leaves behind a legacy of over 30 novels for adults and children. In economic news from New Zealand, the Herald Afternoon Quiz for June 15 highlighted the nation's currency transition from pounds to dollars in a specified year. Adding to the somber atmosphere, shamed New Zealand pornographer Michael Pratt, after 3 years in hiding, has apologized to the women he deceived into participating in porn videos, as he faces a potential life sentence in the United States on sex trafficking charges. Egyptian authorities have been actively preventing activists from marching towards the Gaza border, a move that underscores the ongoing tensions surrounding Israel's blockade of the region. These preventative measures have included expulsions and entry denials. In a separate event, Lionel Messi and Inter Miami's highly anticipated Club World Cup opener against Egyptian side Al Ahly ended in a scoreless draw, disappointing fans eager to see Messi shine on Egyptian soil. Indonesia is currently the scene of an intense police search for 2 Australian men connected to the death of 32-year-old Zivan Ratmanovic, originally from Melbourne, and the injury of another man, aged 34. The incident occurred at a villa close to Mango Beach. Badung Police Chief Arif Batubara has stated that the motive behind the shooting is still under investigation. Meanwhile, Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, has confirmed they are aware of the situation. South Korea is making significant strides in naval technology with the development of drone carrier capabilities. The Hyundai Heavy Industries recently showcased the HCX-23 Plus, a 15,000-ton drone carrier model. This advancement positions South Korea alongside nations like China, Turkey, and Iran in possessing this sophisticated military asset. Japan anticipates a surge in cricket's popularity throughout Asia, fueled by participation in the Asian Games and the sport's inclusion in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Meanwhile, in China, Larry He, Chief of Staff for State Assemblyman William Colton and former Asian Outreach Director for Andrew M. Cuomo, is under scrutiny for allegedly omitting his past employment at a state-owned Chinese firm from his professional resume. Angola has seen the arrival of 8 Mennonite families who relocated from Mexico. This influx has stirred unease among some Angolans. They worry about possible displacement caused by the new settlers. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing scrutiny. The scrutiny stems from allegations of foreign interference in recent elections. Opposition parties are demanding a full public inquiry into the matter. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is pushing forward with controversial pension reforms. These reforms aim to raise the retirement age, sparking widespread protests and strikes across the country. Unions are vowing to continue their resistance. Meanwhile, in Germany, the government is grappling with rising inflation. The inflation is impacting the cost of living for ordinary citizens. The central bank is considering further measures to curb price increases. Shifting focus to India, the nation is experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases. Health officials are urging people to get vaccinated and take precautions. The government is implementing measures to control the spread of the virus. Across the Pacific in Japan, the government is considering revising its defense strategy. The revision is in response to growing security concerns in the region. Increased military spending is expected as part of the new strategy. In Australia, the government is facing increasing pressure to address rising inflation. The Reserve Bank of Australia recently raised interest rates again. This move is intended to cool down the economy. Public debate continues about the best strategies for long-term economic stability. Shifting focus to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new funding for renewable energy projects. The investment aims to boost the country's green economy. Critics question whether the funding is sufficient to meet Canada's climate goal. The initiative seeks to create jobs in the sustainable energy sector. Meanwhile, in France, President Emmanuel Macron is navigating a series of nationwide strikes. The strikes are primarily related to pension reforms. Unions are demanding the government reconsider its plan. Macron insists the reforms are necessary for the country's financial future. Across the Atlantic, the United States is grappling with ongoing debates over immigration policy. Congress is struggling to find common ground on comprehensive immigration reform. But the Biden administration is facing pressure to address the situation at the southern border. The issue remains a contentious topic in national politics. Myanmar is currently facing a severe humanitarian crisis, as ongoing civil war and clashes between the military and anti-coup forces have forced over 600 families to evacuate, seeking refuge from the violence. Shifting our focus to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new sanctions against individuals and entities connected to the Myanmar military regime, further intensifying international pressure. Transitioning to Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation, reiterating the urgent need for increased air defense systems from Western allies amid intensified Russian attacks on critical infrastructure. Moving to the United States, the Federal Reserve held its key interest rate steady, signaling a cautious approach to monetary policy amid concerns about persistent inflation. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing mounting pressure, as widespread protests continue over pension reforms that raise the retirement age. Several countries, including Chile and Colombia, pledged to create 20 new marine protected areas at the third UN Ocean Conference. Experts warn that thousands more are needed to effectively protect ocean life. Turning to Finland, authorities there have brought criminal charges against senior officers of a ship suspected of Russian links. Charges relate to alleged damage to underwater cables connecting Finland and Estonia last year. In Haiti, the United Nations has documented a record number of internally displaced persons. This surge is a consequence of the nation's deepening crisis and the increase in gang-related violence. The Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, suffered devastating floods after intense rainfall. At least 19 people died, and widespread damage occurred. In Mexico, Tijuana, the border city known for migrant crossings, is seeing a decrease in the number of migrants on the streets. Migrant shelters are also less crowded than they have been in the past. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.